Hey guys, this is Jason, JC316. Today I'm going to show you how to take the engine out of a 1996 to 2004 Mustang GT. There are minor differences between the 96 and the 04, but when I say minor, I mean very minor. Just coil unplug versus coil pack. Honestly, that's about it. So this engine that I've got here has 4 dead cylinders and it's completely toast. Ford made these engines remarkably easy to remove as far as removing engines go. I mean, if you're a super beginner, I maybe wouldn't recommend it, but this is one of the easiest engines to really learn on. There are a couple of steps to taking it out. First is you got to disconnect the electrical, which is pretty easy. Actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So the first thing I've done is I've taken the hood off. This, you don't really have to yet, but it makes it a lot easier. You get more light, all that. Take the battery out and start draining the coolant. To drain the coolant, there is a drain plug on the bottom passenger side of the radiator. It's just a bolt. You can get a pair of slip joint pliers on it and you're fine. It'll crack right open. So, after you've started that to draining, you're going to want to start disconnecting the electrical. Now, one way or another, you're going to have to disconnect it all, but for the most part, Ford gave you a quick disconnect right here. It's a 10mm bolt. You undo this, and then this connector here, and then this connector here, and nearly all the wiring comes off on top. So, let me find my tools and we will get started. So, 10mm. And then that pulls right out, and then that is just a typical style connector. Ow! Smash your finger in the process. And then the one other is right there. It's held on with just the standard little clip. And you just grasp it, pull up on it. A little bit of work, it'll come loose. Like so. Now, they also did something there. And again, you just pull on that connector. I'm actually not sure what this is. Looks like maybe an evap line, but right here needs to come off. It just pulls free along with these vacuum hoses. You can label these so you don't forget where they go. I've done this job enough, I can remember. Alright, next up we're going to have to take the throttle linkage off. Throttle linkage generally just either slides up. There, and then this one, you have to rock the throttle forward and then it'll slip off. Pretty standard stuff. And you'll also want to take the spring loose. And it just hooks over. And that gives you access to the 2 bolts on top, 2 10mm. And most of the time I just put those right back on the top. I think I'll do it this time too. Generally if I'm changing the engine I'll store them, but this intake will have to come off anyway and go on the new engine. Okay. The heater hoses will also have to come off, along with the fuel lines. Now the heater hoses can sometimes be stubborn, but in this particular year they use squeeze clips. And it's kind of hard to see, but there are 2 little squeeze clips back there that you pinch together and then pull it out. Sometimes it can be corroded and really fight you. Sometimes not. If you break the clips, you can get them at your local auto parts store in the help section. That one came loose easy. This one's being a little more difficult. Okay, we're back after a brief fight with that. The O-rings inside did break on that one, so I'll have to get the repair kit at the auto parts store. But it's free now. Okay, now we need to take the fuel line off. And this is a specialty tool you can get at a local auto parts store. They're fuel line disconnect tools. They come in a package of 4. I think they run about 10 bucks. The green one here should be the correct size, and it just snaps over the fuel line like that, and you give it a pull and it'll release the clip inside, and that breaks loose. Should make a note that you want to bleed fuel pressure off if you've had this car running. This one's not been running for a while, so it had very little to no fuel pressure left on it. If it has pressure on it, it'll spray fuel everywhere, and you don't want that. Okay, with the electrical disconnected here, the heater hoses, the fuel line, we're pretty close to done on top of the car. Yeah, I know, it doesn't seem like it's much, but it's really not. Ford did a pretty good job about not messing that up. We still need to take the upper radiator hose off and the coolant reservoir as well. And this is a room factor. When you take it out the top of the car, you're really going to need the extra room. So So let's go ahead and grab some slip joint pliers and take these off. I hate these types of clamps. All mechanics do, I believe. Whenever you put the car back together, I highly recommend you change these out with traditional hose clamps. They can sometimes be stuck pretty good. Just give them a good twist. You may have to use a pair of channel locks, like in this case. Or a large pair of pliers. Try not to damage the hose if you can, because these are reusable. There we go. And the hose pops off. For taking the coolant reservoir off, there's a overflow hose right here that'll have to be removed. Squeeze clip. This one can be reused, but you can still replace it with a regular style hose clamp if you want. Again, break it loose. And then there will be 3 10mm bolts there, there, and there. And then one more hose underneath. Take that back. It's not a 10mm. It appears to be an 11 or a 12. 11mm. Okay, so once the 3 11mm bolts are loose, this will lift off and allow you access to the lower clamp. Slip joint pliers, break it loose, same story. Your coolant should be drained at this point, otherwise this is going to leak everywhere. If you do have some spills, just clean them up. The fan may or may not have to come out. It's been a little while since I've done this. It may be just a good idea to get it out of the way so you don't damage it. But right now, it appears, oh, not quite the last thing to do up here. still need to disconnect the power steering reservoir. That's two 10mm bolts. Like that, three 10mm bolts. There's another right there. Now, with this attaches to the power steering pump, and we'll be able to leave the power steering pump on the car. We won't have to disconnect it or anything else. The AC compressor is the same story. We can just disconnect it and leave the entire system hooked up. Well, one more thing we can definitely do while we're up here is take the belt off. Find my correct ratchet. It just uses a 3/8, and then you can pull it and get the belt loose. One other thing we'll have to remove while we're up here is this bracket. Now, depending on your model, I don't believe the 96s have these. 96, 7, or 8s have these. But this one definitely does. You'll need to take that bolt out. It looks to be a 13mm. No, it's not 13. I'm slipping. It's a 10mm. And it appears you can just loosen it and get that piece out of the way, and that will drop with the AC compressor. That line will be out of your way. I don't really see much else up on top of the engine that needs to come off. You can put the throttle cables out of the way. I just kind of stick them down in there. And that appears to be nearly everything on top. So I shall review what I need to talk about on the lower end, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, one other point I need to make on the surface of the engine is the power wire that comes over here. We're going to have to disconnect it and all of its support wires up under there. So we need to disconnect it from the power distribution box, and this top piece should just lift right off. It should be a slider mechanism. Which reveals access to the nut. Your battery must be disconnected at this point, otherwise you run the risk of shocking. This will be a 13mm. And my 13 has run away. There's a 13. And a lot of times this will try to move the box. It can be really stubborn. you want to use kind of a sharp movement to try to break it free. I have had these where it's just impossible to get them without breaking the box, but this time sharp movement broke the nut free. And then the cables just slip right off from the nut. Put the nut back just so you won't lose it. There are, looks like 3 connectors here. This one and these 2 right here will have to be removed, and that should be the remainder of the wiring harness up top. And you can fold that out of the way. And now, provided I haven't missed anything else on the surface, I will be back with the underneath portion of this job. And we're back. Car has been raised and fully supported on jack stands. The more distance you can get, the better, but still be safe. Okay, there are certain elements under here that can change depending on whether or not you're leaving the transmission or taking it with you. I believe in this case I'm going to be taking the transmission with it. It's just personal preference. I'm not sure which one's easier. I've done it both ways. So the points we're going to have to talk about under here is getting the AC compressor and the power steering pump off, the exhaust system, cross members, the drive shaft if we're taking the transmission with it, and sometimes even when you're not, you still need to be able to pull the transmission back, so it's best to get it loose. Now, let's get going. I like to do this part first because it is the single most frustrating thing that this engine has to offer, and that's taking the exhaust off. Someone has already done an exhaust job on this, so the bolts could be broken loose, but on a bone stock car that nobody's ever messed with, this can be a pain in the ass. You got 2 bolts there, 2 bolts there, and then 4 more back at the back on the mid pipe, and then a handful of electrical connectors for the oxygen sensors. So, first things we're going to want to do is get the electrical connectors disconnected. Let's see if I can get you the proper lighting. But there is the electrical connector for the driver's side O2 sensor. They're easy enough to take apart. You just press the tab and pull. Sometimes they don't like to come apart easy though. Just keep working at them, don't get frustrated. Passenger side can be a little bit trickier to get to. It's kind of hard to see, but it is up on top of the bell housing. You most of the time have to work by feel. So just follow the wire up, find the push tab. It is. Push it and get it disconnected. Again, sometimes they can be really frustrating. And a lot of times they come easy. Now, somebody has put mill eliminators on this one. You may run into this. These are designed to make the rear oxygen sensors send a lot of crap to the CPU to make the check engine light go off when you're not running cats. But we'll disconnect those in a second. Right now I want to talk about these. The passenger side is generally easy on the nuts. Somebody has added an aftermarket here, so I'm not quite sure about the sizes. But they should be 15mm stock. Yes. Now, you may have to use a variety of different extensions and swivels and a lot of patience. But here we go. I'll see if I can keep you going with me. I may have to shut it off while I do this. Alright, for the top, I'm using a short extension, a medium extension, a swivel, and a 15mm long socket. I'm coming in on the outside of the exhaust pipe, going up over the surface. You really do not want to round the heads off on these. If you do, it's a major pain to deal with. So if you feel like it's slipping, reevaluate, hit it with a torch if you have to. Just don't rush this part. You can even sometimes get an impact if you've got access to air tools. And mine broke loose pretty easy because, again, somebody's already done this. But when these are rusted, they can be very difficult. I've even snapped the studs in half before just because they're welded together with rust. Sometimes it's unavoidable. So, that one is loose. This bottom one here, I can't tell if it's a 15 or not. It appears to be bigger. But, yeah, it's bigger. Yours should be the correct size to start with. Well, while I've still got the 15 on, I'll show you the driver's side. Now, the driver's side can be the most difficult because the starter is kind of in your way. But there's the bolt, and then up on top is another one right behind the oxygen sensor. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not. Let me see if I can remember the proper extension sets here. I know I'm running along. Extension. Alright. Show you how this is done. It's a long and a medium and a swivel and the same 15 long. And you go in on the outside of the exhaust pipe and get at it. And then it comes down here and that gives you access with the ratchet. Alright, that one broke loose easy. Put the bolt in a pan. Now, the second one, you cannot get at it with a traditional style long socket. These sockets here are a little bit shorter than a traditional long socket. You can get it with a normal one, but it's tough. And now, let me see if I can show you here. There's a little indentation in the subframe right there. You're going to want your swivel to kind of be locked into that so you can get at that bolt. This can make it especially tough if you're having to use an impact to try to break the rust loose. Again, don't lose patience. Just take a step back if it gets too much, and you won't make a mistake that'll really cost you. Now, I'm on it pretty good. When you're doing this, I recommend doing the driver's side first so you don't have the pressure of the pipe pulling down on it. The passenger side is generally pretty easy. But that side is done. I just got to get that one, and then we'll move around to the back. So I shall return. Alright, we're back. Got the bolt out. Now, one other quick thing we can do is take this crossmember support off. It's a little close in here, but it's two 15mm bolts. And anytime you're taking a support loose, just make sure your head's out of the way. Just in case there's pressure, but should be alright. And this has got to come out to take the engine out, and it makes it a lot easier to get the exhaust pipe out. Again, just two really long 15mm bolts. They can be pretty slimy from oil leaks. And the wing style nut on top. And this in here. Again, just watch yourself whenever you take this out so it don't fall on you. Yeah, I just lost the camera. Okay, now that that's out of the way, you can see it allows you a lot easier access to the exhaust pipe whenever we go to drop it. So I'm going to move to the rear of the car where I will disconnect the backside exhaust pipe nuts. Reposition, be right back.